At the end of the Cold War, the absence of an evil empire left America at something of an impasse. The Navy designed its powerful fleet for combat on the high seas. Now the war they had prepared for would never be fought. Instead, regional conflicts beckoned the Navy closer to shore, out of the deep blue, and into the shallow brown of the world's coastlines. The Navy had to reevaluate not only their mission, but how they use men and machines to accomplish that mission. Imagine that you're a third world dictator with delusions of grandeur. You've spent a good deal of your nation's gross national product on state-of-the-art weaponry, on missiles, tanks, aircraft, and perhaps a surplus Russian submarine or two. You're thinking that a little cross-border adventure might pay off, might bring you increased access to shipping lanes or some useful natural resources. And one morning you wake up and look out across your pristine private beach and see floating offshore in perfectly legal international waters a couple of American warships. Intimidating, maybe, but how effective? You've got your shoreline mined, pillboxed and covered from end to end with guided missiles that skim the waves like deadly supersonic surfers. You figure that you can raise the cost of international heroism to a level unacceptable to the American electorate and increase your own stature in the process. You're covered, right? Well, consider this. The Navy you're looking at has almost nothing but tradition in common with the United States Navy you'd have faced 10 years ago. The new United States Navy has been reorganized from the ocean floor up for just this kind of confrontation. It's armed with new ships, new weapon systems, and a new battle doctrine called Forward from the Sea. For 40 years, driven by the Cold War, the United States Navy had a clear purpose: be prepared for open hostilities with the Soviet Union. Those hostilities might begin any number of places over any number of issues, but the end result would be pretty much the same: worldwide conflict of a devastating and likely brief variety. It was the job of the Navy, should World War III actually begin, to do simply what no Navy had ever done before: dominate all of the world's seas at once and hold them while lobbing retaliatory strike after strike into the enemy's heartland. Generations of Americans spent billions of tax dollars and the creative lives of thousands of scientists and engineers, making possible a war so horrible that no one would dare start it. It became a war of theoretical capabilities, a strategic dance where a false step meant not just social embarrassment, but the end of civilization as it was then known. As the Cold War reached its climax, the Reagan administration embarked on a quest for a 600-ship Navy. It would have been the largest and most powerful naval force ever assembled, a fleet designed to fight everywhere at once without benefit of support from the other military branches or the home front. Then the world changed. Almost overnight, the great Soviet bear of American nightmares imploded, leaving the Navy and America dedicated to a suddenly obsolete strategic model. America and the Navy needed to rethink.
It's a changing world. The big war, heading up to the Norwegian Sea with 5 battle groups is not what's going to happen anymore.
The Cold War gave way to a kind of hot peace. Regional conflicts, long held in check by American and Soviet rivalry, flared unpredictably.
As of January 16, 1991, 28 nations are at war with Iraq.
In 1992, President George Bush put in motion a top-down national security review based on the diplomatic, political, and economic realities of the post-Soviet world. Cold War or no Cold War, it was obvious that the Navy would retain two of its basic roles. In deep canyons far below the ocean's turbulent surface, nuclear missile submarines would still await the horrible possibilities. On the surface, naval transport would still provide America's pipeline to large-scale overseas operations. Beyond that, everything else was up for grabs. An inventory of naval capabilities produced an impressive and imposing list of components for strategists to work with. There were a dozen aircraft carriers capable of lingering off hotspots for months at a time without weakening, 85 nuclear submarines, and 12 amphibious assault ships that could deliver swarms of ground troops. The Navy had maritime patrol craft that could monitor virtually all movement in hundreds of square miles, battleships armed with guns that could hurl 2,000-pound warheads 30 miles, and cruisers that could creep up on blockade runners like a cold winter fog. It had ships to mine harbors and other ships to sweep the mines away, and it had special operations forces, including the SEALs, a commando force created by President Kennedy that combined the stealth of a cat burglar with the impact of an armored battalion.
With the drawdown of land-based forces all over the world, that leaves the forces that are most flexible, most mobile, to keep the peace in many areas, and in many areas that's the United States Navy.
The Navy's battle space would be the littoral regions, the shallow coastal waters and land within reach of the sea that are home to 80% of the world's population. It is in the littorals that future conflicts are most likely to pop up, battles over territory, economic influence, and ethnic resentment.
We have this idea of forward presence, where our Navy is seen around the world as a symbol of the United States, its power and its willingness to use that power to protect our national and international interests.
The new Navy would be an expeditionary force in which different components could be mixed, matched, and dispatched to fit particular world situations. The name the Navy gave its new strategy reflected the new emphasis. They called it From the Sea.
This group of carrier, cruiser, destroyer, submarine, large amphibious attack ship, and smaller amphibious ships, self-contained, has the ability to exercise forward presence, whether it's just to be there, to be seen, whether it's there to respond to a crisis, or whether it's really there to put down a conflict.
From the sea moved the Navy out of the relative safety of the deep blue and into the unpredictable waters closest to the most intensely defended enemy shores. There, naval task forces faced a latticework of possible threats. Just getting in close to shore is among the most dangerous of military adventures.
The mine warfare is always going to be the implement of choice for the poorest of the third world nations that we deal with, because it provides an enormous amount of leverage over a very powerful and capable force with a relatively small investment. You have to be able to deal with it.
Minesweeping, once an almost quaint vestige of wars past, took on a new importance. The Navy embarked on an ambitious construction schedule, putting 26 new mine hunters into the pipeline. Submarines, which previously emphasized attack over reconnaissance, became stealthy mappers and dismantlers of minefields. Once an area is clear of mines, a host of other threats appear almost literally on the horizon.
The difference in combat in the littoral as opposed to that in the high seas is that things happen a lot faster. The timelines are shorter. Whenever you have the ability to stand out off at distance and lob something at somebody, you clearly can do it with a lot more confidence than when you have to go in at short range and duke it out with them.
But while Doctrine moved American ships closer to foreign shores, technology brought to third world nations weapons that barely a decade before had been exclusively the domain of the superpowers. The Navy's bad dream ceased to be Soviet nuclear submarines. It became instead a pickup truck equipped with a Chinese Silkworm missile launcher. Pulled up on a Mideastern beach like any tourist, that low-cost improvisation could cripple the most sophisticated American warship.
There are currently, I think, 77 nations around the world that have some kind of capability with cruise missiles. What they haven't had to date is an ability to use those cruise missiles against land targets. They've been primarily directed against ships at sea.
Even as the threats have grown, naval budgets have shrunk.
That is, the Navy is the instrument of the American people. You know, we are doing the will of the nation that we protect and defend. And through the mechanisms of budget and congressional guidance, you know, we have been told you need to decrease in size. We in uniform simply take that direction and we build with the monies that are apportioned the very best Navy, the best trained Navy that we can muster.
The mandated cuts obviously aren't easy, and the arguments over what goes and what doesn't can be bitter. One of the most hotly debated was the decommissioning of the last American battleships, the USS Missouri and USS Wisconsin.
They left a hole in two key areas. One is that nothing right now provides the lethality of the type of round that you have with a 16-inch round, and the type of repetitive firepower that you could provide with that ship.
Remaining is a surface fleet of sleek cruisers and destroyers that, working in concert with aircraft carriers and submarines, provide a level of battle space dominance almost unimaginable 2 decades ago.
Today's Navy and Marine Corps uses speed. You know, no problem is so big that you can't run away from it. I say that sort of tongue-in-cheek, but and we, in most cases, do not see the enemy because of modern warfare with intelligence inputs and long-range weaponry. We reach out and touch someone from a long distance.
While the hardware of naval battle is changing rapidly, the more significant changes are in the software, the ability of American forces to exchange information. Today's Navy flotilla is awash in a stream of pure data from spy satellites, National Security Agency overflights, infantry patrols, and other Navy ships.
If you can't communicate, you can't fight. Warfare is so rapid today that where you had minutes or sometimes hours in past wars, you have seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. Missile away! Yes, sir.
The Navy brass took from the sea an aggressive step further. No longer content as gunboat diplomats, the mildly retitled Doctrine Forward from the Sea postulates the Navy as a preemptory force capable of fighting and quickly extinguishing international conflicts before they become wars. The result is likely the most in-your-face force in American military history. A Navy that owes as much to Crazy Horse as it does to Farragut.
That's what Forward from the Sea is all about. Be there, able to respond just as this crisis starts, so it can be stopped with a a credible force, but a small force, rather than having a delay as it festers and grows and involves other nations and other people, and then you must respond in a much heavier manner.
You're a dictator with delusions of grandeur. Every morning you look across the beach and see an American warship. It's been there, looming like a specter for 2 months. You have given speeches to your people, promising not to back down, promising to humiliate the foreign interlopers. You may be just learning the rules, but you're certainly enjoying the game.
When I was playing basketball in high school, and I admired a particular college team, my high school, or my college team from the state was West Virginia, and Jerry West was playing for them then. And they used a thing called the zone press, and they put they always had 2 or 3 men where the ball was. And that's kind of how I think of naval forces. You put the force where the ball is.
The bureaucrats call it power projection. It is the threat applied, push coming to shove, the logical conclusion of an illogical process. The truism of our times is that the president in times of crisis almost automatically asks where the carriers are.
There is no more impressive weapon system on Earth than the aircraft carrier and the planes that it launches. There is no force on Earth that is comparable.
The other great punch from the air is delivered by the Tomahawk cruise missile. With a range of over 1,000 miles, the cruise missile launchers can be positioned far behind the protective wall of American firepower. There, the carriers and cruise launchers can operate with near impunity.
In the end, you still have to win the land. You still have to take away the enemy's bayonet. And but as was proven in the Persian Gulf War, that process can be different with less loss of life. And the more rapid and more surprising it is to the enemy, the less you lose.
The final assault, if there is to be one, begins silently. Subs scout paths through supposedly impregnable minefields. A handful of black-clad SEALs wade ashore to raise hell with command and control. Planes and cruise missiles swoop overhead, wiping out shore batteries and rocket launchers. Marines in armored hovercrafts fly over carefully laid barbed wire, and American attack subs guard the subsurface flank. There is nothing new about delivering fire from ship to shore, nothing new about submarines ferrying in special operations forces, or about the use of carrier-based aircraft to deliver the ultimate message. And while there may not be as much sheer power as the Cold War Navy could boast, there is certainly the ability to direct it more precisely, to waste less, and accomplish more.
We're going to be ready on arrival to do whatever it is we need to do, and we've got the staying power to do it for quite a while. We don't need a big logistics tail to support us, at least not initially.
Imagine that you were a third world dictator with delusions of grandeur. You were looking across the pristine sands of your local beach at an American warship. You're thinking about putting up barbed wire and making a stand. You know that somewhere under the waves is a submarine, and you know that somewhere over the horizon is an aircraft carrier. parked down the coast is an amphibious assault ship ready to burst forth a squall line of stir-crazy Marines. And you know that somewhere out there are eyes and radar scanners and infrared photographs documenting your every move. The whole world is waiting to see what you're going to do. The smart money is betting that you're gonna rethink. Key to the Navy's post-Cold War strategy is forward presence. The smaller American fleet may not be everywhere at once, but when a crisis develops, chances are an aircraft carrier can be there in a matter of hours. The men who keep the warbirds aloft are supported by thousands of sailors who serve on a city at sea. Think about this one thing. If you could deploy a carrier to the time of ancient Rome, the entire Mediterranean basin would be yours. Name your era. The Spanish Armada would be an afternoon's target practice for a single flight of F-18s. The Mongol hordes would be powerless. Hannibal's elephants, nothing more than a curiosity. Take the Theodore Roosevelt back to the time of Theodore Roosevelt, and you wouldn't have to charge up San Juan Hill. You would have, unquestionably, the biggest stick in the world. The modern aircraft carrier, so often referred to as the point of the American power projection spear, would have been, in another time, a city-state. It has all the attributes. Down below the flight deck, down below the glamour of cat shots and smart weapons, there is a thriving economy that feeds and clothes its citizens. There are libraries and theaters, an infrastructure of sewers and aqueducts, an entire world contained within the armored walls of a single ship. It is the mobile home to thousands of hard-working sailors who directly or indirectly make possible the most formidable power projection device ever conceived by man. They come from all walks of life to the greatest power projection force man has ever devised. They are drawn like actors to the bright lights of Broadway, disparate elements that must form a cohesive whole if the show is to go on. And they are, rightfully, awed.
Biggest surprise to me was the size of the ship. It was unbelievable. I was just astonished to see how big it was and how many people they have. It's just like a floating city.
A city at sea. A city built around its airport. A city whose industry is power projection. There are two social classes on an aircraft carrier. The higher caste consist of the crews that directly support the carrier's aircraft. Those crews which make up the carrier air wing are, in a sense, only temporaries aboard ship. When the carrier leaves port, several shore-based aircraft squadrons go with it. The squadrons are assigned to fulfill whatever mission might be encountered. If the mission brings with it the possibility of air-to-air combat, the air wing will be heavy with F-14 Tomcats. Built to dogfight and clear the skies of enemy fighters, an F-14 squadron typically consists of 14 aircraft and the crews to operate and maintain them. On the other hand, if the carrier's mission is likely to be attack, Its air wing will be loaded with FA-18s and A-6s. While the FA-18 Hornet fills an air superiority role, it's also equipped to handle the air-to-ground attack mission. The A-6 Intruder is a pure attack platform, an aging steed that carries an enormous bomb load. Other embarked aircraft squadrons add to the carrier's capabilities: electronic warfare, air-to-air refueling, and ship-to-shore transport of personnel, supplies, and mail. The second social class is made up of the 3,000 sailors who are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the ship. They are permanent members of the carrier's crew, the ship's company, and they are aboard no matter what the particulars of a deployment might be. There is a natural rivalry between the ship's company and squadron personnel. They refer to each other, not always affectionately, as squids and Airedales, but they are also mutually dependent. Without the ship's crew, the air wing couldn't do its job. And without the air wing and its planes, the ship's company wouldn't have a job at all. An aircraft carrier's ability to project power begins far below the flight deck. Incredibly, the key to almost every function on a carrier is a power source dating back to the days of Mark Twain: steam.
The engines are designed, they look like a bunch of propellers put together with small fan blades. The steam hits these blades and spins the engines. These engines are hooked up to more or less simply a transmission, which in turn is hooked up to the shaft and to the propeller that's sitting in the water. And this forces it to turn and moves the ship through the water. And without the steam, the ship is going no place.
That steam also powers the catapult which launches the warbirds off the flight deck. Steam runs the generators that create electricity, which cooks the food, does the laundry, and makes the hot showers hot.
I'm the utilities department. I'm the guy that comes by and makes sure if your water pipe breaks, I come by and fix it. If the pole gets knocked over by somebody backing into it, I'm the guy that comes out with the truck and sticks the pole back up so that you get power back to your house. And when the wind comes by and rips your phone lines out, I'm the guy that comes back and puts the phone lines back in. And if you need a plumber, I'm the person you'd call.
The technicians who maintain the boilers are burdened with an unfortunate nickname: snipes. They are named for the imaginary flightless birds that burrow unseen in their dark little holes. It's a cruel but apt description. Engineering spaces are hidden in the deepest recesses of a ship. They're noisy, grimy, and invariably hot. Filthy jobs, like scouring the inside of the boilers, have to be done on a regular basis.
You sit in a space that's maybe 4 foot by 4 foot, and it goes straight up, and sometimes you have to hang from a harness to keep from falling, and you scrub and the stuff falls in your eyes and your hair, down inside your uniform. And the worst part about it is this residue will burn your skin, and it's just a completely nasty job.
It's more than a job. It's an adventure. Snipes take comfort in the knowledge that their work is mission essential. Without them, the ship, quite literally, is dead in the water. It is the job of the supply department to stock and track nearly $250 million worth of spare parts, from jet engines to paper clips.
The old chief engineer probably said it best. This is just a big hunk of steel with millions of parts attached to it. And we try to support all those systems that are on here, from the radars to the aircraft to the engineering plant.
The supply department is the ship's commercial center. It runs the bank, the post office, the recreation center, and most importantly, makes sure that the carrier doesn't run out of food and fuel. When a carrier leaves port, the supply department has packed it with roughly 45 days worth of food. Every week or two, supply ships, immense floating warehouses, rendezvous with the carrier. In a process called vertical replenishment, Navy helicopters transport pallet after pallet of supplies to fill the carrier's 13 storerooms. The same principle applies when the ship runs short of aircraft fuel. Replenishment oilers sidle up to the carrier and begin refueling the carrier's million-gallon fuel tanks. It's like getting a fill-up from a gas truck without leaving the freeway.
There's not too many things that happens on a ship that somebody in the supply department isn't deeply involved in.
An economy doesn't function, of course, without money. To meet payroll and incidental expenses along the way, the supply department takes with it a petty cash roll of 10 million taxpayer dollars. One advantage to life aboard a carrier is its sheer size. Sea swells that make even the saltiest sailor turn green on a frigate barely register on a ship bigger than 3 football fields. But comfortable as it may be, it's still not home. As weeks at sea stretch into months, there is little to break up the monotony of work. A sailor's day tends to revolve around the next meal. Imagine feeding 5,000 hungry sailors 3 times a day for 6 months.
Potatoes for you?
That's 2,700,000 meals. There are 5 restaurants on a carrier, 2 enlisted mess decks, 2 officer wardrooms, and a mess for the senior enlisted crew members. They're open for business 22 hours a day, and they've got a budget that would make a discount airline blush.
Each member of the crew gets, we get a ration credit for that guy, $5.09. And that's for 3 meals. 1 person, 3 meals, $5.09. So we take that credit, and that's how much money times the number of people in the crew that we can spend to break even every day with our food costs.
Feeding a 5,000-member family on such a tight budget takes some creative menu planning. Tonight's entree? Spaghetti. Makes your mouth water, doesn't it? Prepared in 80-gallon kettles, it takes 160 to 200 gallons of sauce for a single meal. And that's only 1 entree. Most meals have 2 to choose from. The ship's bakery also works around the clock, churning out 800 to 1,200 loaves of bread a day. Augmenting the galleys is the ship's store. A cross between a mini-mart and a corner drugstore, it provides some creature comforts in an otherwise Spartan shipboard existence.
The ship stores carry like a wide range of food items and stuff that people, like at night when they're showing movies and stuff, they go in there and buy chips and everything you could think of. Any type of junk food item you could think of, we carry it.
The ship servicemen also run the barber shop, which handles nearly 200 haircuts a day. These guys can't afford to be butchers. They have to make each haircut perfect because their patrons know where they live.
There's a lot of pressure to do a good haircut, especially when you're working with officers and the chiefs in their barbershop. Because if you screw up one of their haircuts, then it gets right back to your whole chain of command. You find out about it within minutes.
The other place you'll find ship servicemen is chin deep in laundry. Cleaning pants, shirts, and sheets for 5,000 people is a mountainous task. A mountain that, for these guys, never seems to get smaller. The work that goes on inside the skin of the ship may seem mundane, but it's vital.
We have a lot of very good people that run the fire department and the police department and the galleys and the restaurants on board and they run the airport, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess when it ultimately comes down to it, I'm the responsible for all the decisions that are made on board. So I guess that would equate to being the mayor of the city. I guess as President Truman once so aptly put it, the buck stops here.
The safe launch and recovery of aircraft is an intricate ballet. Air Wing personnel choreograph the dangerous dance from box seats high above the action. Using a scaled-down model, jokingly called the Ouija board, they plan and monitor all aircraft movement on the 4-acre flight deck. Their cohorts are a rainbow of color-coded aircraft handlers, In preparation for a launch, the purple shirts, or grapes, fuel the aircraft. The red shirts fuse the proper ordnance under its wings. Also in red is the crash crew, the flight deck fire department. When the plane is ready to go, the blue shirts remove the chocks and chains that secure the aircraft to the carrier deck. The yellow shirts direct the aircraft into launch position. The green shirts take over from there, attaching the plane to the catapult. Flight deck crews often endure 16 to 18-hour days in freezing rain or 105-degree temperatures. Deafening noise, fuel fumes, and jet blasts make for a dangerous day on the job.
I was standing at a spot where I thought I was safe, and I was trying to take down missile numbers, and a bird that I thought was totally out of my way just turned at the last second at a 90-degree turn and pointed its engine straight at me. Before I could move out of the way, it just caught a hold of my ankles and threw my ankles down, and I did like a second base slide for about 3 or 4 feet.
Up to now, everyone has played their part in getting that plane safely off the deck. The engineers have created the steam, the supply department has provided the aircraft fuel, and the crew has a full stomach and clean socks. But in the city that is an aircraft carrier, the unquestioned upper crust is the aviator. Their status is not unwarranted. There are few jobs that take the kind of skill and sheer courage of naval aviation. Today's jets are bigger, more powerful, and more expensive than they've ever been. Learning to fly them is a competitive, lengthy process. The pilots are aware, of course, of all the crew support it takes to get them off the deck, which may be why pilots, far from taking outward joy in their unique positions, become stoics.
As you're walking to the jet, or as you're strapping in, or as you're doing your pre-flight or something like that, there comes a time where you kind of get your game face on. It's, you know, it's probably the same thing that football players do, probably the same thing that basketball players do. It's kind of a moment where you kind of shift your emphasis from, you know, thinking about what you need to do on the flight to what you're actually doing.
The final manager of the city at sea is the air boss, the carrier's head air traffic controller.
What's our traffic count?
If flight operations are going to run smoothly, if the city is to fulfill its destiny, it will ultimately be the air boss's responsibility. He tells the pilots when to take off, when to land, and if a landing seems too risky, when to wave off.
Fairly early in my tour as the air boss, early during my last deployment, we had a F-14 ramp strike, which means an F-14 got dangerously low on his approach and actually impacted the back of the ship, short of the runway, if you will, and that resulted in the airplane crashing onto the flight deck, the air crew ejecting, flaming debris spreading across my entire flight deck at night, and basically turning my flight deck into a fireball. Now, with all the millions of dollars of airplanes and people, most importantly people, all the fuel on the flight deck, we had the potential for a major catastrophe. But it was, again, very rewarding to see that flight deck organization that's been so well trained to respond.
The 8-point earthquake in Los Angeles, the floods in the Midwest, a blackout in New York. It is the catastrophe that ultimately fuses a city into a community. And on an aircraft carrier, It is the ever-present threat of catastrophe that makes, out of many, one. Every pilot strapped into a warplane knows that he is backed by thousands of support personnel. Every pilot knows that while he may be the prince of the ship, it is teamwork which forms the foundation of society in a city at sea. The mere presence of a carrier offshore often diffuses a situation before it begins. But when diplomacy fails and tension boils over, it may be necessary for a ground force to physically occupy the land. That's when it's time to call in the Marines. Imagine being an American sailor back in 1775. Your life is uniformly horrible, your food disgusting, your living conditions cramped and unsanitary. You go on long voyages punctuated by brutal battles. In those days, sailors who didn't jump ship by night almost certainly daydreamed of mutiny. It's no wonder captains wanted a seagoing police force to keep the sailors in line, a force of armed toughs who could keep the rabble down. Those men were the first Marines. As time passed, the job of the seagoing cops expanded. During battle, they nestled high in the rigging, raining musket fire and grenades onto the decks of opposing ships. As the ships locked in hostile embrace, the Marines jumped the rail, engaging the enemy in fierce hand-to-hand combat. 220 years later, Marines are still serving on ships. No longer are there masts for them to climb or mutinies to put down. Now, when an international crisis arises, Marines answer the call. They are America's ultimate 911 force. In the modern world, the Navy's job is power projection. They can do that. They have the ships and the aircraft to loiter and attack anywhere in the world. But warfare in the littorals is a three-dimensional game, and that third dimension is the ground. To project power effectively, the Navy has to have a ground force.
The Marine Corps, really the Navy Marine Corps team, give the Commander-in-Chief the capability of an amphibious force in readiness that can go virtually any place in the world, taking advantage of the fact that about 75% of the world is covered by oceans and seas, and have the flexibility, a combined arms approach, a certain amount of sustainability to protect U.S. interests wherever the need may be.
The Marine Corps actually falls under the Department of the Navy. It provides much of the supportive infrastructure for the Corps. The Navy buys the ships and some of the aircraft and supplies all of the Corps' medical care. But the Marine Corps Commandant sits on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and has an equal say on defense matters. Out of more than 1.5 million active duty military members, only around 170,000 are Marines. At first glance, the Corps seems to duplicate elements of the larger services. Marines fight on the ground, like the Army. They use fixed-wing fighter aircraft, like the Air Force, and they routinely serve aboard ships, as do sailors.
We are the forward edge. We're out there for the purpose of, if anything were to happen, instead of trying to round everybody up back here, you already have the Fleet Marine Force out front.
7 out of every 10 Marines belong to the Fleet Marine Force, the muscle of the Marine Corps. These are combat Marines who spend most of their careers deployed to some trouble spot or training to fight. Marine Corps strength comes from its versatility. Each potential crisis is an intricate puzzle. The challenge is finding the right combination of pieces to complete the picture, the right mix of people and equipment to get the job done.
We have to, as best we can, project what the game will be, what the crisis may be, and train to that crisis as much as we can, but in a much broader scale. So if we weren't right on the mark, that team can still play and win.
At its heart, the Marine Corps is an infantry organization. The best weapons system the Corps has, or at least the one that has made the most impact, is the grunt on the ground.
One thing that's unique about the Marine Corps is that every Marine is a rifleman.
That Marine's basic weapon is the M16 rifle, a 9-pound, 5.56 millimeter automatic that packs a 30-round magazine. The M16 can kill an enemy soldier at up to 800 meters, over half a mile. It's been a long time, however, since anyone won a war with just a rifle. When the Marines storm ashore, they bring with them a wide array of state-of-the-art weaponry. For long-distance shelling, the Marines pack M198 howitzers, which can rock a target with a 6-inch projectile at 15 miles. Though artillery is, at heart, a primitive weapon, the contemporary updates to it have vastly increased its impact. Modern warfare requires not only broad artillery barrages. Any amateur with 1,000 rounds can do that. Today's coordinated assaults require putting the first round not only on target, but at the exact moment it's supposed to be there. For more direct fire, there's the TOW guided missile system. Designed as a tank killer, the TOW can be carried into battle by infantry, fired from a Cobra helicopter or from the back of a Humvee. As the TOW speeds toward its target, it pays out a wire behind it, allowing its operator to control and adjust its flight path. Since the Gulf War, the Marine Corps has been replacing the venerable M60 with the state-of-the-art M1A1 Abrams tank. Though the M1 was originally designed for and deployed by the Army, the Marines have adopted it to their own unique battle doctrine. The Army uses tank battalions to go head-to-head with similar enemy units. The Marines use the tanks in smaller numbers, mainly to support and protect the soldiers carrying the M16. The M1 packs a 120 millimeter gun that is highly accurate to about a mile, a distance one of their shells covers in about a second. The M1 can fire anti-tank or anti-personnel hardware, making it a deadly battlefield tool. Unfortunately, the M1 is a logistics nightmare. Its turbine engine is a gas guzzler, about 2 gallons to the mile, and it weighs 25,000 pounds, which makes it hard to transport. The element of surprise is key to the success of an amphibious assault. The Marines mount their attacks from far offshore. A dock landing ship will usually sit off the coast about 25 miles over the horizon, out of sight of all but the most sophisticated detection devices. The belly of the ship is loaded with Marines waiting for the bus to take them to dry land.
All these weapon systems we got can take any objective in the world, but the only one weapon system we got that can take it and hold it is the infantry.
Transportation is key to the Marine mission. To get themselves and their equipment from ship to shore, the Marines use 2 basic landing craft. The first, designed to get the all-important foot soldier ashore, is the Armored Assault Vehicle, or AAV. It has tracks like a tank and thin aluminum armor. But unlike a tank, it swims. The basic version of the AAV is 26 feet long and officially can carry 25 Marines. Of course, if a squad of Marines has brought aboard the usual necessities, radios, explosives, and the like, you'll be more likely to squeeze only 13 Marines in its belly. It's noisy, smelly, and cramped, but as Marines like to say, the worst ride is still better than the best walk. Finally, there is the Landing Craft Air Cushion, or LCAC, owned by the U.S. Navy but operated for the Marines. The LCAC uses 4 jet engines to fly over the waves. Loaded with up to 75 tons of tanks, trucks, and LAVs, the LCAC can cruise over water at up to 50 miles an hour, with a range of more than 300 miles. No matter how good an infantry might be, no commander is going to let his troops set foot on hostile soil until he knows they're safe from enemy aircraft. It's a familiar image, Marines charging up the beach. But Marines don't just charge on the ground anymore. They also attack from the sky. Some of the most important work of Marine aviation is done long before the grunts even hit the beach.
Air is a force multiplier, and we know what battlefield prep can do. You don't send a Marine where a bullet or a bomb can effectively do the job.
The role of deep air support is to attack enemy targets that are not engaged with friendly forces. Deep air support was what happened to Baghdad the night Desert Shield became Desert Storm. The Marines have several aircraft that can penetrate enemy airspace, but the best among them is the FA-18 Hornet. Unlike the single-seat Navy version, the Marine Hornet has room for a pilot and his Weapons System Officer, or WISO. It's the pilot's job to maneuver through the enemy's defenses, and it's the WISO who puts the bomb on target. Operating primarily from aircraft carriers, the Hornet is by no means the fastest bird in the sky, but it's agile and capable of performing in all types of weather. Close air support, viewed by the Air Force as somewhat beneath them, is the glory mission for Marine Air. Putting bombs and bullets on an enemy only meters from friendly forces requires a high degree of skill and training.
We call CAS putting a bomb within 1,000 feet of friendly lines, hitting accurately and taking out whatever the ground side needs to be taken out so they can accomplish their mission and continue to push.
The Marine Corps has added incentive to get close air support right. There's a bond between the guy in the plane and the guy on the ground that transcends the chain of command. It has to do with the fact that they earned the same uniform. They come from the same family. Everyone on that battlefield is a Marine. Close air support is the primary job of the AV-8 Harrier and the AH-1 Cobra. British designed and built by McDonnell Douglas, the Harrier is a miracle of modern technology and something of a freak as well. It's not designed for air-to-air combat and doesn't even carry rudimentary air-to-air radar. What it does do is defend troops on the ground. Its angle rate bombing system and excellent fire control computer makes it an extremely accurate platform for delivery of bombs, rockets, and cannon fire. And its ability to take off and land from any weed patch, dirt road, or tennis court means the Harrier can be based near the Marine infantry units that it supports. It uses 21,000 pounds of vectored thrust to muscle its way on and off the ground like a helicopter, and can then turn and jet forward at 635 miles per hour.
I like to say we're the four-wheel drive of aviation. We can manage to put anything, anywhere, as needed to support the ground element.
Vertical takeoffs consume a tremendous amount of fuel. So normally you will see the Harrier take off down a runway or a flight deck, conserving its fuel to fly farther or carry heavier bombs. The Harrier's more conventional partner is the AH-1 Cobra helicopter. Originally deployed as a gunship late in the Vietnam War, today's Cobra is a dedicated tank killer. It is swift, rugged, and carries laser-guided Hellfire anti-armor missiles. The call for fire comes from the forward air controller, usually a Marine pilot temporarily assigned to a ground combat element. As the attack develops, he coordinates the close air support mission with the amphibious assault, making sure the bombs and bullets fall on the enemy rather than on the Marines. No battle plan can work if the trigger puller runs out of food and bullets. That's where the Combat Service Support Group comes into play.
We provide supplies. We commonly refer to it as beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, and quite literally that's what it is.
The faithful pickup truck for the Corps is the CH-46 Sea Knight. The Sea Knight delivers troops, weapons, food, ammunition, and supplies required by a task force operating far from the ship. It's an imposing sight, but still just the baby brother to the CH-53 Sea Stallion, the biggest rotary wing aircraft in the U.S. Armed Forces. The Sea Stallion is designed to haul heavy artillery, up to 32,000 pounds inside or on its external cargo hooks. It also carries up to 55 Marines. There's a wide range of skills in a combat service support group. Most of the jobs have civilian equivalents, such as truck drivers and the mechanics who keep the trucks rolling, doctors and dentists, forklift operators, heavy equipment operators, and logistics specialists.
They're decisive in that they give us the sustainability that we need to go someplace where perhaps there is no water and to create fresh water, potable water, where there is no power, to make power, where you need to prepare the beach to land across it. Those are support functions that we can't do what we do without.
These services are critical because tacticians know that logistical limitations can determine the outcome of a battle. So the Combat Service Support Detachment has to be able to meet the demands of the fighting forces.
They're trigger pullers. We're logisticians. Without them, we have no reason to exist, and without us, they can't exist.
The strength of the Marines is the Corps' ability to handle anything. It is the only branch of the service with infantry, helicopters, air superiority fighters, armor, and ships at its disposal. Of course, not every 911 call is a 5-alarm fire, and not every international incident requires a desert storm. The key is flexibility.
It's difficult to explain how you really feel when all of a sudden we're not training anymore. Now it's real, and once you do receive that call, the first thing runs through your mind is, oh boy, we gotta go, it's time.
A Marine Expeditionary Unit floating around the middle of the Indian Ocean is dispatched to the shores of a distant troublemaking nation. As preparations begin for an amphibious assault, it's clear that the mission will require more firepower than a mule can provide. Another forward-deployed amphibious assault ship chops into the area, carrying additional Marines and equipment. A nearby aircraft carrier battle group steams into the picture. Beaches are selected for landing, and units are assigned to those beaches. The attack phase begins according to a precise schedule, with naval gunfire and aircraft attacking the beach defenses. Meanwhile, the landing forces wait for the impending amphibious assault. Weapons are checked and rechecked. Heads are counted and recounted. Whatever rivalry that may exist between the sailors and the Marines disappears.
They know that we're sailing that ship to send them into harm's way, possibly, when they go to the beach. We know that they could get shot at and they could get killed.
Finally, it's time to mount up. The LCAC's aircraft engines roar to life, and the ship drops its ramp, exposing the well deck to the sea. A sister ship not far away begins disgorging armored assault vehicles crammed with Marines. Helicopters pass overhead. Higher up, F-18s pass through the sound barrier on their way to distract the enemy. A spear is forming, and the point of that spear, sitting anxiously in a cramped landing craft, is the Marine with the M16. The half-hour ride to shore is anything but fun. Marines liken it to sitting in a metal cork bobbing its way to the beach. The air bombardment lifts just seconds before the assault elements come ashore. If the timing is right, the defenders will be in a state of shock, vulnerable, even helpless. The track driver coordinates with the other AAVs to navigate to the designated landing spot. As the tracks grab for sand, the Marines throw open the hatch and explode onto the beach. It is the job of the first elements ashore to secure the beach for the others who will follow. Harriers and Cobras hover overhead. Hornets are destroying enemy communications, preventing reinforcement and reaction. All of the elements come together to make the intricate seem effortless. It all breaks down to the individual Marine. That Marine whose ancestors began as little more than a seagoing police force. There are times when a situation calls for a force on the ground less visible than the Marines. A force that can get in, get the job done, and get out, projecting an almost ghostly sort of power. The Navy has a force created just for that. Their numbers may be few, but they're mighty in spirit, reputation, and capability. They are not what you might have heard. Under the cover of darkness, they slither out of the surf onto the beach. Their every move is calculated, stealthy. You could be standing 10 feet away from them and never know they were there. They are the Navy Sea, Air, Land Commandos, or SEALs. As much as they are anything, SEALs are Olympian athletes, constantly preparing for the gunshot that opens their deadly games. Shrouded in secrecy, SEALs are more often than not falsely portrayed as assassins, Rambo wannabes running through the jungle slaying the enemy barehanded. But talk to any SEAL and you will quickly learn they're far from Rambo. Loners aren't tolerated, and no SEAL believes he can be more effective by himself than with his team. Whether during a training exercise or out in the field, no SEAL is ever intentionally alone. It is teamwork that makes these men so lethal. It is teamwork that allows them to feel secure in a job that's the most dangerous of human endeavors. "50 years ago, before the massive invasion force could descend on the beaches of Normandy, a group of men had the responsibility of clearing away underwater obstacles. They were Navy frogmen, underwater demolition teams, the grandfathers of today's Navy SEALs. The first SEAL teams were commissioned during the Vietnam War to infiltrate coastal areas, sabotage enemy installations, and report on enemy troop movements.
President Kennedy, as he entered into about the middle of his term, looked at the armed forces, saw a need for a special force that could do some of the work that was evolving around the world, which required small units, specially trained, to work with foreign nations, to be able to do specialized operations, basically special operations. And so in 1962, he directed the Department of Defense to establish both the U.S. Army Special Forces and the Navy SEAL teams. And from that point forward, both those units have been forces in being.
You think you'd rather be a part of this adventurous group than sit behind a desk 9 to 5? Not so fast. There are a few requirements. You must be under 28 years of age, and you can't be colorblind. You have to pass a physical fitness test that includes doing 42 push-ups in under 2 minutes and 50 sit-ups. Then you're going to have to lace up your combat boots and run 1.5 miles in under 12 minutes. If you can do that, congratulations. You've earned a chance. You still have to prove to everyone, including yourself, that you have what it takes to be a SEAL. Your proving grounds? The Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. There, every SEAL does his basic underwater demolition training, or BUDS.
The whole idea of BUDS is not only to find those, but to take the young men who might be on the cusp, so to speak, and to elicit from him that, because he's got it there. The idea is to make them understand that they have great potential. So the idea of BUDS is not to make young men go away, it's to make all those young men understand that they can, in fact, do it. And we are working very hard to be successful at that.
It is, SEALs believe, the toughest military training in the world. It has to be. The SEALs' mission is the toughest mission, and their preferred weapon is training. BUDS is the time when those who are cut out to be SEALs excel, and those who aren't are weeded out.
initially we had about 140 guys, and a lot of them were great athletes, and I wouldn't even consider myself in the top half of of my class initially. And I thought, wow, how can I compete with these guys? And then I discovered it's not always the best athlete that makes it through. That all the physical demands, if you have that little spark inside, you can push yourself over the edge. You can push yourself out in front.
Over the 26-week-long course, Bud students are continually challenged, both physically and mentally. They begin Bud's training after a 7-week preconditioning course, feeling like they're in pretty good shape. They soon find out that no matter how strong they may be, it's not strong enough.
It seemed like they tried to build the whole body system, running, swimming. They wanted to push it to your limit, like if you could do 100 push-ups, they would push you to do 101. They wanted to break you down to see that you can go beyond that point.
Bud's is broken down into 3 phases. The first phase is a grueling 9-week overall conditioning course. Bud students spend that time in constant motion, running, swimming, and doing calisthenics. The concept of teamwork is drilled into them like muscle memory, the underlying message of everything they do.
Guys that are loners don't make it through training. They can't, because the training is designed for teamwork. It's designed for a greater purpose, for a greater function that no one sole individual can ever accomplish.
They are taught from the very first day to follow instructions and that they're a liability if they try to be Rambo.
How come you can't seem to get in sync with everybody else? Your hands are going up and everybody else's hands are going down. Looks like a big accident waiting to happen, son. You better start thinking about what you're doing here. You understand me?
Yelling at a student because he is out of sync during calisthenics may seem harsh, but when they're out in the field, togetherness is literally a matter of life and death. The activities themselves are structured to foster cooperation and trust. Students learn how to maneuver inflatable boats or zodiacs through the ocean's treacherous surf. They paddle together and portage together. As they do, the men and equipment seem to fuse, making the incredibly dangerous seem almost mundane. The same group that struggles to lug a zodiac over a sand dune will soon enough be dragging themselves out of the back of a C-130, together with absolute surety that no one will waver. 6 weeks into Buds, just when the SEALs in training start to think they're getting the hang of things, the veteran instructors have a reality check for them. Hell Week. 5.5 days of continuous training with only a few hours of sleep. Students are pushed far beyond what they'd ever thought they could do. Some make it, some don't.
When we had the Admiral come out on the beach and say, well, we're all the same now, we've all been through Hell Week. And as you look at your class size, we start out with 87. We dropped 30-something people in Hell Week. But to sit there even after Hell Week and look at all the people that you made it with, knowing everything you went through, that 5 days is amazing.
Exhausted, filthy, and emotionally drained, they come away from Hell Week knowing how they will respond to stress and anxiety. They come away with greater self-confidence. They can trust how they will react and believe in their teammates. They have a bond, an experience that none of them will ever forget. But their training has only begun. There is a tradition in Buds that when a candidate drops out, he rings a bell announcing his departure. By the time Buds have reached phase 2 of their training, the bell has rung many times. Those that remain may not have been the strongest coming in, but they have proven that they have the motivation, drive, and determination that it takes to be a SEAL.
Like body size and height it doesn't make a difference. They want to see what's inside of your mind and your heart to see if you're going to keep pushing and do your best.
As the weeks progress and the body and mind grow, so does the intensity of Bud's training. Repetitions are increased and minimum passing times are lowered. Throughout all the phases of Bud's, students are required to run the obstacle course, which prepares them for some of the treacherous conditions they may meet while in combat. During Phase 2, Bud students begin to acquire the skills that will carry them through their careers. For 7 weeks, the students stay extremely wet as they learn 2 types of combat scuba. First, there is the open circuit, where the air you take in is then exhaled into the water, creating bubbles that can be seen on the surface. Closed circuit scuba is more stealthy. The air a diver exhales is recycled through a scrubber. Divers moving with closed circuit equipment leave no incriminating bubbles behind. By the completion of Phase 2, students are effectively able to maneuver themselves from their launch point offshore to their combat objective. The water has become as much their home as the land. Regardless of the insertion tactic, the objective remains the same: getting to the target quickly and safely, accomplishing the goal, and then getting out alive. Cast and recovery is one way of getting out of bad places fast. Bud students in the water await what is called a string line recovery. It is an extraction maneuver that allows a small craft to pick up seals from the water while staying in constant motion.
Start going over the exam.
Overshadowed by the physical training is the academic aspect of a student's life. Bud students spend hours in the classroom learning dive tables and studying tactics.
Everyone's under the delusion that Bud's training is solely physical, and that is a misconception. Bud's training is not a solely physical endeavor. It has a lot of intellectual and cognitive processes going on there. And I was in the gym the other night, and a Marine told me that SEALs are the most cerebral warriors, and that's pretty much the fact. We're not just grunts humping around shooting. We actually have a very technical mission, that actually requires a lot of academic study. And people solely think that SEALs are these guys who just hang out and work out and train all day, and that's not at all the fact.
After 17 weeks, it is time for the Bud students to fuse their new skills and knowledge together into a coherent package. They are like journeyman carpenters who know how to drive screws and pound nails, but who have never built a house. During Phase 3 of their training, students learn to take the raw material of their training and build it into success on the battlefield. Phase 3 is demolition, reconnaissance, and land warfare training. It takes place off the coast of California on San Clemente Island. There, Bud students and trainers spend 5 weeks out of sight of the world. Amid the rocks and scrub, they learn to apply their skills in the Navy's closest approximation of the real world.
The basic crux of SEAL training is to teach the young man that through a constant series of challenges over 25 weeks, that there is no restriction on what he's able to do. So it is a very challenging course. It is a safe course, but in the sense that we can never replicate combat. But certainly it pushes the young man to the point that when he gets into that kind of a situation, he has great self-confidence in himself, he believes in himself and his teammates, And that is the underpinning of what basic SEAL training is all about. And it has worked very well for us.
Bud students return from San Clemente as SEALs. Though their formal graduation remains ahead of them, their recognition within the Corps is secure. They have paid all the dues anyone could ask them to pay. When a SEAL graduates BUDS and embarks on a naval career, his education has only started. There is a constant stream of information to assimilate, a constant increase in the military's technical capability. It is a key aspect of SEAL life to stay on the cutting edge. Though SEAL commanders bristle when their hard work is seen by outsiders as play, it is impossible not to think of some of the SEAL equipment as toys. Take, for example, what the brass call a desert patrol vehicle. Based on an off-road three-man racing vehicle designed by Chenoweth, the DPV can operate anywhere a four-wheel drive vehicle can, only faster and with more maneuverability. It is, of course, no toy. Toys don't come with a Mark 19 40mm grenade launcher, 2 M60 machine guns, and 6 light anti-armor weapons. No dune buggy has state-of-the-art satellite navigation systems, and most drivers prefer Ray-Bans to night vision goggles. The DPV can blast over enemy territory at over 60 miles an hour, pick up a downed pilot, and come roaring back before the enemy even has time to react. The DPV isn't a SEAL's only means of transportation. As training continues, SEALs learn more specialized insertion and extraction techniques. Using the fast rope technique, SEALs can put an entire squad on the ground in 3 to 5 seconds. They are even trained to exit a submerged submarine. They also launch with their Zodiacs from the exterior of a submarine as it slips beneath the waves. These techniques allow SEALs the flexibility to get in and out of any of the world's trouble spots, which is important. Imagine a SEAL mission from start to finish. Imagine it built of blocks formed out of training. A call comes in. There is trouble somewhere within reach of American warships. The SEALs gather, board transports, and move to the hotspot. There is nothing they are going to do that they haven't done hundreds of times before, except that this time, the bad guys will be real.
Navy SEALs and Special Operations Forces in particular can do a couple of things. One, they can certainly operate independently when necessary, but they can also be part of a larger conflict where they, with their special skills and their special ability and mobility, are able to support large conventional forces.
When the SEALs arrive, they decide a route in: sea, land, air. They are prepared. From their earliest physical conditioning, they have passed hundreds, even thousands of tests. That is the bedrock of their capability, the foundation that provides their security. They will do their best work out of sight of the world, utterly dependent on each other. Those SEALs have died in combat. No body has ever been left behind. No member of the team has ever been abandoned. It is ingrained in them from the start of BUDS, and by boat or helicopter or foot, they go in and come out together.
The support of what we do is going to end up saving lives. A 16-man platoon doing a recon on the beach or patrolling inland is going to save probably tens to thousands of Marines that will be following us. when I look at it from that perspective, it's an awesome feeling. Knowing that people coming in behind me, if I'm doing my job right, is going to save their life. Which means we accomplish our mission, they accomplish our mission, and we all come home. I truly believe in that.